The story of the world's first cities begins long before massive stone walls, towering ziggurats, or bustling marketplaces came into existence. It begins with the slow, steady shift of human life from a wandering existence to one rooted in stability. For thousands of years, humans lived as nomadic hunter-gatherers, moving across vast landscapes in search of food, water, and shelter. Life was uncertain, fragile, and often dictated by the forces of nature. The first great change came with the development of agriculture. When early humans learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals, they unlocked the ability to create a steady food supply rather than relying solely on hunting or seasonal gathering. Farming allowed people to remain in one place for longer periods. And with stability came the seeds of something much larger than anyone at the time could have imagined. As farming practices spread, fertile river valleys became the natural magnets. For human settlement, the rivers offered more than just water. They provided rich soils, natural irrigation, and a means of transport. Settlements first appeared in regions like Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, the Nile Basin, and later the Yellow River in China. These were places where nature gave humanity an opportunity and people seized it. Villages grew around fields of barley, wheat, or rice, and families built permanent homes instead of temporary shelters. The knowledge of storing surplus harvests also transformed life. For the first time, humans were not forced into constant movement during times of scarcity, because granaries and food reserves meant survival during harsh seasons. But agriculture alone did not create cities. The transformation from villages to urban centers was a process of human imagination and cooperation. As villages grew, population density increased. More people living in close quarters meant new challenges: organizing space, dividing labor, ensuring resources, and maintaining order. Leadership structures began to form as some individuals rose to manage disputes, oversee food distribution, or guide spiritual practices. This leadership slowly evolved into systems of governance. Alongside rulers, religious figures emerged, building temples and shrines that served as both spiritual and community centers. What once were clusters of houses soon became organized, spaces with designated areas for worship, storage, trade, and communal gathering. Trade became another key factor in the birth of cities. As villages specialized in different goods, networks of exchange began to connect them. A community skilled in pottery could exchange with another skilled in metalwork, while yet another produced textiles. This web of interaction brought new materials and ideas into each settlement, fueling growth. The need for designated trading areas, marketplaces, and storage hubs created the very heart of early cities. They became places where not only goods, but also knowledge and culture were exchanged. With surplus food and organized trade came social stratification. Some people could devote their lives to tasks beyond farming, such as craftsmanship, priesthood, or administration. Skilled artisans made tools, ornaments, and structures that elevated daily life, while scribes and priests preserved knowledge or interpreted divine will. Over time, layers of society developed, and with them, the complexity of human relationships deepened. This complexity fueled the need for new systems of record-keeping, rules, and collective identities, further reinforcing the bonds that held growing populations together. Technology played an equally important role in shaping these early cities. The invention of irrigation systems allowed communities to harness rivers and direct their waters into fields with precision. Mud brick construction provided durable housing and the ability to build walls for protection. The first attempts at organized architecture began to define the skyline of ancient settlements. Roads were laid out, sometimes deliberately in grid-like patterns, to manage the flow of people and goods. In some regions, drainage systems reflected remarkable foresight. In maintaining cleanliness and health, these innovations were not isolated events, but the result of human collaboration and a shared need to adapt to challenges in larger, permanent communities. Spiritual and cultural life also became deeply entwined with the birth of cities. Temples, altars, and sacred enclosures emerged at the center of settlements, representing the shared beliefs of the community. These religious centers acted as more than just places of worship. They were also hubs of authority, storing wealth, organizing festivals, and legitimizing rulers. Religion created unity in expanding populations, giving them a shared identity and purpose. With this identity came traditions, myths, cultural expressions that solidified the character of each community. The birth of civilization through cities was, at its core, about human adaptation. It was about taking the unpredictable elements of nature and creating systems that could endure. A city was not simply a larger village. It was a transformation of human life into something far greater. It was a place where order began to rise from chaos, where cooperation overcame isolation, and where innovation thrived because of human interaction. It marked the moment when survival gave way to progress, when the immediate need for food and shelter evolved into the pursuit of art, knowledge, power, and meaning. When we speak of the world's first cities, one name rises above all others: Mesopotamia. This land, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, is often referred to as the cradle of civilization, and for good reason. It was here, around 4000 to 3000 BCE, that humanity's earliest true cities began to emerge. Unlike the small farming villages that dotted river valleys, Mesopotamian cities grew into sprawling centers of culture, trade, governance, and innovation. The geography of the region played a pivotal role. The Fertile Crescent, blessed with nutrient-rich alluvial soil, allowed agriculture to flourish in ways unseen elsewhere at the time. Farmers learned to harness the rivers, building canals, levees, and irrigation systems that controlled the unpredictable floods and ensured steady harvests. With abundant food and careful water management, populations grew beyond the capacity of a simple village, giving rise to organized urban settlements. The earliest of these were cities like Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. Uruk, in particular, has earned a legendary status in human history, often cited as the world's first true city. By 3000 BCE, Uruk was a bustling metropolis with tens of thousands of residents. What set Uruk apart was not only its size, but also its complexity. It boasted monumental architecture, including massive temples known as ziggurats, that towered over the landscape. These structures were both religious and political centers, serving as symbols of divine authority and human achievement. Surrounding them were neighborhoods of houses, workshops, and marketplaces, all interconnected by streets that hummed with daily activity. Uruk was more than a collection of buildings. It was a living organism, sustained by agriculture, trade, and governance. One of Mesopotamia's most groundbreaking contributions to humanity was the invention of writing. The earliest system, cuneiform, emerged around 3200 BCE in Uruk. At first, it was a practical tool used to record transactions, trade agreements, and inventories of goods stored in temple granaries. But over time, writing evolved into something far greater. It became a medium for storytelling, lawmaking, and cultural preservation. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest known literary works, was born here, offering a glimpse into the worldview of the people of Mesopotamia. Writing provided permanence to human thought, allowing knowledge to be passed down across generations. And it cemented the role of Mesopotamian cities as hubs of intellectual progress. The growth of cities also demanded new forms of governance. As populations expanded, simple tribal leadership was no longer sufficient. Kings and priest-kings emerged as central figures, often claiming divine favor to legitimize their rule. They oversaw not only the administration of resources, but also the enforcement of law and the defense of their cities. Hammurabi of Babylon would later codify one of the earliest known legal systems, the Code of Hammurabi, which established rules of justice and order within society. The notion of governance in Mesopotamia laid the foundation for political structures that would shape human civilization for millennia to come. Trade in Mesopotamian cities extended far beyond their immediate surroundings. Lacking certain natural resources such as timber, stone, and metals, the people of Mesopotamia turned to long-distance trade to acquire these essentials. In return, they offered textiles, grains, and crafted goods. Merchants carried goods across deserts, rivers, and seas, linking Mesopotamia with regions as far as the Indus Valley, Anatolia, and Egypt. These trade networks not only enriched the cities, but also fostered cultural exchange. They bring in new ideas, technologies, and beliefs into Mesopotamian society. Urban centers became cosmopolitan hubs where diverse influences converged. Stimulating innovation and artistic expression, art and architecture flourished alongside trade and governance. Mesopotamian artisans produced intricately carved cylinder, seals, ornate jewelry, and beautifully decorated pottery. Temples and palaces were adorned with reliefs that depicted both religious rituals and scenes of daily life, offering insights into the values and aspirations of the people. Ziggurats, the stepped temple towers, became iconic symbols of Mesopotamian culture, embodying the link between heaven and earth. These structures required advanced knowledge of engineering and collective labor, reflecting the organizational capabilities that cities had nurtured. Religion was deeply woven into the fabric of Mesopotamian urban life. The people believed their cities were under the protection of powerful deities, and each city often centered around the worship of its patron god or goddess. Temples were not merely places of worship, they were economic and administrative hubs. Priests oversaw the distribution of resources, organized festivals, and acted as intermediaries between the divine and human realms. Religion provided a sense of unity and order in rapidly expanding urban populations, reinforcing the legitimacy of rulers and the cohesion of society. Yet life in Mesopotamian cities was not without challenges. The rivers that sustained them could also destroy them, with floods sometimes sweeping away entire settlements. Conflicts between city-states were frequent, as rulers competed for control of land, water, and trade routes. Warfare became a defining feature of the region, leading to the development of organized armies, fortified walls, and advanced weaponry. Despite these struggles, the resilience of Mesopotamian cities ensured their survival and growth for centuries. They adapted, rebuilt, and innovated, each setback driving further advancements in governance, technology, culture. The legacy of Mesopotamia as the cradle of urban life is profound. It was here that humanity first experienced what it meant to live in a true city, a place where thousands of people coexisted, cooperated, and competed in an environment shaped by human ingenuity. Mesopotamia gave the world writing, law, monumental architecture, and long-distance trade, each a cornerstone of civilization itself. Its cities demonstrated the extraordinary potential of human communities to transcend mere survival and create something enduring, something that would echo through history long after their ziggurats crumbled into dust. While Mesopotamia is celebrated as the cradle of civilization, the rise of urban life along the Nile River in ancient Egypt was equally transformative. Egypt's geography created a unique environment for the development of cities, and its natural rhythms shaped one of the most enduring civilizations in history. The Nile's predictable floods deposited nutrient-rich silt across its floodplains, creating fertile land that allowed communities to thrive agriculturally. Steady annual cycles offered a sense of security that supported long-term planning and settlement. Out of this stability emerged cities that not only became centers of governance and culture, but also reflected the Egyptians. It's a deep connection to the river that sustained them. The earliest Egyptian cities developed as small settlements along the Nile's banks, gradually expanding into more organized urban centers by the time of the Old Kingdom around 2600 BCE. Unlike Mesopotamian cities, which often operated as independent city-states, Egyptian cities were unified under a central authority from early on. This unity gave rise to a strong and enduring state, headed by pharaohs who claimed divine authority as living gods on earth. Cities such as Memphis and Thebes became symbols of this power, serving as political and spiritual capitals where the authority of the pharaoh was projected through monumental architecture and elaborate rituals. Memphis, located strategically at the junction of Upper and Lower Egypt, emerged as one of the earliest and most significant cities in the kingdom. It functioned as a political capital for centuries and was home to grand palaces, sprawling temples, and administrative complexes that oversaw the governance of Egypt. The city thrived on trade, As goods from across the Nile Valley flowed through its markets and workshops, craftsmen produced fine jewelry, pottery, and statues, while scribes kept meticulous records on papyrus scrolls, ensuring that the pharaoh's decrees and the state's economic life were carefully documented. Memphis was not only a center of power, but also a hub of culture and innovation. Reflecting the dynamic energy of early Egyptian urban life, Thebes, another major city, rose to prominence during the Middle and New Kingdoms. It became a spiritual capital, housing temples dedicated to gods like Amun, whose cult grew enormously influential. The sprawling Karnak temple complex in Thebes remains one of the largest religious sites in the world. Built and expanded over centuries by successive pharaohs, each ruler sought to leave their mark through grand construction projects, adding obelisks, pylons, and colossal statues that still inspire awe today. Thebes was also closely associated with the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs were entombed, in richly decorated chambers filled with treasures meant to accompany them into the afterlife. These sites illustrate the deep intertwining of religion, governance, and urban development in Egyptian cities. Unlike Mesopotamia, where cities were often walled for defense against external threats, Egyptian cities rarely relied on massive fortifications. The deserts that flanked the Nile served as natural barriers, offering protection from large-scale invasions for much of Egypt's early history. This relative security allowed Egyptian cities to develop with more openness and less emphasis on warfare, at least in their formative centuries. The lack of constant conflict gave Egyptians the freedom to focus their resources on monumental architecture, artistic expression, and advancements in science, mathematics, and medicine. Cities became reflections of cosmic order, carefully planned to align with religious and astronomical principles. Urban life in ancient Egypt was deeply shaped by religion. Every city had its patron deity, and temples stood at the heart of civic life, not just as places of worship, but also as centers of economic and administrative activity. Temples controlled vast tracts of land, employed thousands of workers, and stored surplus grain that could be distributed in times of need. Priests held significant power, acting as both religious leaders and economic managers. The pharaoh, though, seen as divine, depended on this vast temple system to project authority and maintain stability throughout the kingdom. Festivals, rituals, and processions filled the streets of Egyptian cities, creating a strong sense of community and reinforcing the sacred nature of urban life. The Nile itself was the lifeline of Egyptian cities, functioning as both a source of sustenance and a highway of communication. Boats carried people and goods up and down the river, connecting distant cities into a cohesive network. Trade routes extended beyond Egypt, linking its cities with Nubia to the south, the Levant to the northeast, and even regions as far as Mesopotamia. From Nubia came gold and ivory, while cedar wood arrived from Lebanon, and luxury goods like lapis lazuli traveled from distant lands. These exchanges enriched Egyptian cities, filling their markets with exotic materials that artisans transformed into objects of beauty and power. The daily life of ordinary citizens in Egyptian cities was also shaped by the rhythms of the Nile. Farmers, artisans, traders, and scribes formed the backbone of urban society, each contributing to the functioning of the state. Farmers supplied the surplus food that allowed specialists and administrators to thrive. Artisans filled the workshops with crafted goods that adorned homes, temples, and tombs. Scribes trained in the complex system of hieroglyphic writing maintained the bureaucratic machine that kept Egypt's centralized state functioning smoothly. Urban neighborhoods bustled with activity, from children playing in courtyards to traders haggling in markets, creating a vibrant social fabric within the monumental backdrop of pyramids and temples. The grandeur of Egyptian cities was perhaps best embodied in their architectural achievements. The construction of pyramids, particularly during the Old Kingdom, represented not just religious devotion, but also the organizational capacity of urban life. Building such colossal structures required careful planning, thousands of laborers, and vast resources, all coordinated through the cities that managed Egypt's state. Far from being simple tombs, These monuments symbolize the unity, ambition, and technological skill of Egyptian civilization. Later, temples such as Karnak and Luxor showcase the ongoing vitality of Egyptian cities as centers of creativity and power. The endurance of Egyptian cities, lasting for millennia, speaks to their remarkable adaptability and resilience. Despite periods of political upheaval, foreign invasions, and internal decline, cities like Memphis and Thebes retained their cultural significance for centuries. They embodied the Egyptian worldview, in which life on Earth was a preparation for eternity, and urban spaces were designed to reflect this eternal order. Through their monuments, art, and records, Egyptian cities offer a window into a civilization that defined itself through its intimate relationship with the Nile and its unshakable belief in the divine order of the cosmos. When discussing the world's first cities, the Indus Valley civilization holds a unique and remarkable place, emerging around 2500 BCE in what is today Pakistan and northwestern India. Its urban centers stand out for their advanced planning, engineering, and organization, which were unmatched by many of their contemporaries. Unlike the more widely studied civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt, the Indus Valley remained mysterious for centuries because its script has not yet been fully deciphered. Despite this, the archaeological remains of cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro reveal a sophisticated society whose urban design was centuries ahead of its time. The Indus cities were laid out with an extraordinary degree of precision. They followed a grid system where streets intersected at right angles, resembling the modern layouts of many contemporary cities. This geometric order suggests that a central authority or collective governance oversaw urban planning, ensuring consistency across different settlements spread over a vast territory. The streets were wide and carefully organized, separating residential areas from marketplaces, industrial zones, and civic spaces. This level of planning indicates not just architectural knowledge, but also a vision for social order and efficiency that went far beyond the needs of survival. One of the most striking features of the Indus Valley cities was their emphasis on sanitation and water management. Archaeological evidence shows that almost every house was connected to a well or had access to fresh water. Equally remarkable were the drainage systems. Covered brick-lined drains ran alongside the streets, channeling wastewater away from homes and public areas. These drains even had inspection holes for cleaning, which speaks to the civilization's attention to hygiene and maintenance. In many ways, the sanitation systems of the Indus Valley surpassed those of later civilizations by millennia, reflecting a deep concern for public health and civic organization. Mako-Daro. One of the largest cities of the Indus Valley provides a vivid picture of urban life in this civilization. Its Great Bath, a large watertight pool made of baked bricks, stands out as a remarkable example of public architecture. The structure was likely used for ritual bathing or communal gatherings, indicating the importance of cleanliness and perhaps spiritual practices linked to water. Surrounding the Great Bath were buildings that suggest the presence of administrative or religious functions. Though the exact nature of governance in these cities remains a mystery, unlike Egypt, where divine kingship shaped urban development, the Indus Valley seems to have been less focused on monumental palaces or temples. Instead, its cities reflected collective priorities, with a stronger emphasis on civic amenities than on grand displays of centralized power. Residential life in these cities also speaks to a relatively egalitarian social structure compared to other ancient civilizations. While there were larger homes and smaller ones, the overall uniformity of housing materials and access to facilities like drains and wells suggests that wealth disparities were not as extreme. Houses were built from standardized baked bricks, and many had multiple rooms, courtyards, and even staircases leading to second stories. Some homes featured private bathrooms with connections to the drainage system, a luxury that would not appear in many parts of the world for thousands of years. This uniformity reflects not only advanced engineering, but also a cultural value placed on equality and collective welfare. Trade and economy played a vital role in the flourishing of Indus Valley cities. Archaeological findings, such as weights and measures, indicate that the civilization developed a standardized system of commerce that facilitated exchange across long distances. Seals engraved with animal motifs and undeciphered script have been found in Mesopotamia, suggesting that the Indus people traded extensively with other early civilizations. Goods such as cotton textiles, beads, and pottery moved outward, while copper, tin, and other raw materials flowed inward to sustain urban industries. Harbors like Lothal reveal that maritime trade was also significant. Connecting the Indus cities to distant lands through the Arabian Sea, craftsmanship and artistry flourished in these urban centers. The discovery of finely made jewelry, pottery, figurines, and intricate seals points to a society that valued both functionality and aesthetics. Bead-making workshops, pottery kilns, metal workshops uncovered in excavation sites show that entire industries were organized within the cities. These industries not only supported daily life, but also contributed to the civilizations. External trade networks. Such a high degree of specialization suggests that the cities were not merely centers of residence, but hubs of production and cultural creativity as well. Religion in the Indus Valley remains enigmatic, as no large temples or monumental shrines have been discovered. Instead, small figurines, altars, and symbolic motifs hint at religious practices that may have centered around fertility, nature, and animal worship. The famous Pashupati seal, depicting a seated figure surrounded by animals, has led some scholars to speculate about early links to Hindu traditions, though such connections remain debated. What is clear is that spiritual life was woven into the daily rhythms of these cities, expressed through household rituals and community spaces rather than massive temple complexes, despite their advancements. The decline of the Indus Valley cities remains one of history's great mysteries. Around 1900 BCE, the urban system began to unravel. Scholars suggest that climate change, shifting river patterns, or overexploitation of resources may have played a role. As the rivers dried or changed course, agriculture would have faltered, leading to food shortages and the dispersal of populations. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, where military conquest often reshaped cities, the decline of the Indus seems to have been more gradual and ecological in nature. This disappearance left behind no grand narratives of kings or empires, only the silent ruins of once great cities, yet the legacy of the Indus Valley's urban centers endures. They represent one of humanity's earliest experiments in large-scale urban living, marked by extraordinary achievements in planning, sanitation, and organization, even though much about their society remains unknown due to the undeciphered script. The physical evidence of their cities continues to inspire awe and respect. The streets, drains, and buildings of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro remind us that long before modern nations existed, there were people capable of creating environments that prioritized health, order, and communal welfare, setting standards that many later civilizations would struggle to achieve. The emergence of the world's first cities left an enduring legacy that continues to shape human civilization today. These early urban centers were not simply clusters of dwellings or marketplaces. They represented a new way of organizing human life, one that influenced social structures, cultural developments, economies, technologies, and governance systems for millennia to come. The transition from rural village life to complex urban settlements created a framework for how societies could grow, to interact and innovate, laying the foundations for what we now recognize as modern civilization. The legacy of these cities is visible in the very fabric of contemporary societies. From the ways we design our infrastructure to the systems of governance we follow, innate, and even in the cultural traditions that continue to resonate. One of the most profound contributions of the first cities was the establishment of organized governance and administration. Early cities such as Uruk in Mesopotamia, Memphis in Egypt, and Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley required sophisticated management systems to function. As populations grew into the tens of thousands, leaders and administrators emerged to coordinate trade, manage food surpluses, enforce laws, and oversee public works, such as irrigation canals, granaries, and defensive walls. These governance systems laid the groundwork for the development of states and kingdoms, transforming small communities into powerful urban-based civilizations. Even though the forms of governance varied from Mesopotamian city-states ruled by priest-kings to the more collective organization of the Indus Valley, the principle of centralized management became one of the most enduring legacies of the first cities. The world's first cities also played a pivotal role in advancing technology and innovation. Urban life required solutions to problems that rural villages had never encountered, such as waste management, transportation, and large-scale food storage. As a result, new technologies were developed to meet these challenges. The Indus Valley created advanced drainage and sanitation systems. Mesopotamia introduced cuneiform writing to manage trade and governance records, and Egypt perfected monumental architecture through their temples and pyramids. The concentration of skilled artisans, builders, and thinkers in one location allowed ideas to spread quickly, accelerating innovation in agriculture, metallurgy, pottery, and textiles. This clustering of knowledge is something that continues in modern cities, where universities, industries, and cultural institutions thrive on shared ideas and collaboration. Echoing the patterns set by the earliest urban settlements. Economically, the world's first cities transformed how human societies interacted with their environment and with each other. Urban centers became hubs of trade, both local and long distance. Mesopotamian cities exchanged grain, textiles, and crafted goods for metals and precious stones from distant lands. While the Indus Valley civilization engaged in maritime trade across the Arabian Sea, this interconnectedness created the first networks of global exchange, where goods, ideas, and cultural practices flowed between regions. The legacy of these trade networks can still be seen in the ways modern cities serve as economic and cultural crossroads, attracting diverse populations and creating cosmopolitan societies. The first cities showed that prosperity was often built on diversity and exchange, a principle that remains true to this day. Culturally, these urban centers became the birthplaces of traditions, religions, and artistic expressions that continue to influence the world. Mesopotamia gave rise to the earliest forms of literature, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. Egypt's monumental art and religious iconography shaped cultural identity for thousands of years. The Indus Valley contributed symbolic seals, figurines, and religious practices that may have influenced later South Asian traditions. Cities served as incubators for intellectual and spiritual life, where scribes, priests, artists, and thinkers could gather, share knowledge, and pass down traditions. This cultural continuity ensured that the values and ideas of the first cities did not disappear, but evolved. Shaping subsequent civilizations across time, the first cities also redefined human identity and social organization. Instead of identifying solely with a kinship group or village, people began to see themselves as members of larger urban communities. This shift altered social hierarchies, created occupational specializations, and fostered a sense of shared identity tied to the city itself. In Mesopotamia, for example, citizens of Uruk were bound by allegiance to their city god and their rulers, while in Egypt, identity was tied to the centralized authority of the pharaoh. In the Indus Valley, identity seemed to emerge through shared cultural practices and standardized systems of weights, measures, and urban design. This idea of belonging to a larger, more complex social unit is one of the most powerful legacies of early cities and continues to underpin national and cultural identities in the modern world. Religious and philosophical thought was also deeply influenced by the rise of the first cities. Urbanization brought together diverse groups of people, leading to new questions about morality, justice, and the relationship between humans and the divine. Temples, shrines, and ritual spaces within cities became centers of religious life, reinforcing social cohesion and providing frameworks for belief systems that continue today. The city as a sacred space became a recurring theme in human history. From Jerusalem to Mecca to Varanasi, echoing the traditions established in the earliest cities where faith and community life were intertwined. Furthermore, the legacy of the first cities is seen in how they transformed human interaction with the natural environment. By building monumental structures, irrigation systems, and defensive walls, ancient urban societies demonstrated the capacity of humans to reshape their surroundings on a grand scale. This relationship between city and environment set a precedent for how later civilizations and even modern societies would continue to alter landscapes to sustain urban growth. While this allowed cities to flourish, it also introduced challenges such as resource depletion, environmental degradation, and vulnerability to climate change problems that still resonate today and can be traced back to the ecological choices made by the earliest cities. Finally, the endurance of these early cities in cultural memory speaks to their profound influence. Even when the cities themselves fell into ruin, their legacies lived on in myths, historical records, and cultural traditions. The ruins of Uruk, Mohenjo-Daro, and Thebes remind us that cities are not just physical spaces, but symbols of human achievement, resilience, and complexity. Their legacy is not limited to their time, but continues to serve as inspiration for understanding how societies grow, adapt, and endure through history.